A father's final lesson. The February air bit cold as I stood at the back of the funeral home, my hands trembling inside my coat pockets. I was 42 years old, but at that moment, I felt like a scared child again. The room was filled with people I barely knew, all dressed in black, all wearing the same expression of practiced sympathy. My name is Catherine Wells, though most people call me Kate. I had been married to Robert Wells for 3 years before his sudden heart attack took him from us. 3 beautiful years that felt both like a lifetime and just a moment. I could feel the stares burning into my back. The whispers had started the moment I walked through the door. I knew what they were saying. Gold digger, trophy wife. She married him for his money. The truth was so much simpler and so much more complicated than that. I met Robert at a community garden on a Sunday morning in spring. I was volunteering, helping elderly residents plant tomatoes and herbs. He showed up wearing expensive loafers that were completely wrong for gardening, holding a small basil plant like it might bite him. He was 68 then. I was 39. We became friends first. Real friends. He told me about his late wife Margaret, who had passed 5 years earlier after a long battle with cancer. He told me how empty his big house felt, how his children had their own lives and rarely visited, how he had built a successful manufacturing business but forgotten to build connections with the people who mattered most. I told him about my own losses, my divorce from a man who valued ambition over compassion, my struggle to pay rent while working 2 jobs as a home health aide, my dream of one day opening a small flower shop that would probably never happen. We met every Sunday at that garden. Then we started meeting for coffee, then dinner. When Robert asked me to marry him, he did it without a ring, without fanfare. We were sitting on a bench watching the sunset, and he simply said, "Kate, you make me remember what joy feels like. Would you consider spending whatever time I have left making each other happy?" I said yes, because I loved him. Not the way movies show love, with fireworks and passion, but with warmth and comfort and genuine care. He was my best friend, and I was his. His children never understood that. Now, as I stood in the funeral home, I saw his son Marcus approaching. He was 45, tall like his father but harder around the edges. His wife Jennifer walked beside him, her face a mask of cold politeness. Marcus stopped directly in front of me, close enough that I could smell his expensive cologne. "We need to talk after the service," he said quietly, his voice sharp despite the low volume. "About the will, about the house, about everything you think you're entitled to." I swallowed hard but kept my voice steady. "Marcus, today is about your father. Can we please just focus on honoring his memory?" His laugh was bitter. "You're good, I'll give you that. Playing the grieving widow, but we all know what this was. You saw an old man with money and you moved in for the kill." "That's not fair," I whispered, feeling tears sting my eyes. "I loved your father." "Right," Jennifer chimed in, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "You loved him. Is that why you convinced him to change his will 6 months ago? Is that why suddenly you're set to inherit the house and 1/3 of everything?" "I never convinced him of anything," I said, my voice shaking now. "I didn't even know he changed his will. Robert made his own decisions." "We'll see what the lawyer says," Marcus replied coldly. "We're contesting everything." "You won't see a dime, Catherine. I promise you that." They walked away, leaving me standing there, shaking. Several people had witnessed the exchange, and I could feel their judgment settling over me like a heavy blanket. The service was beautiful but painful. Marcus gave the eulogy, and he was good at it. He talked about Robert as a father, as a businessman, as a pillar of the community. He showed photos from Robert's youth, from his marriage to Margaret, from family vacations and milestone moments. I wasn't in any of the photos. Our 3 years together were erased from his official history, as if they had never happened. When it was over, people filed past the casket, paying their last respects. I waited until the crowd had thinned before approaching. I stood there looking at Robert's peaceful face and whispered, "I'm so sorry. I never wanted to cause problems with your family. I just wanted to make you happy." The lawyer is ready for us in the conference room. Marcus's voice startled me. I turned to see him standing with Jennifer and Robert's daughter Claire, who was 42 and had barely spoken to me since her father and I married. Behind them stood an older gentleman in a suit, carrying a leather briefcase. "I'm Arnold Patterson," the lawyer said, extending his hand. "I handled Robert's estate planning. He asked me to read the will immediately after the service, with all parties present." My stomach churned. "Can't this wait?" "It feels wrong to talk about money when we just buried him. Dad specifically requested this timing," Claire said, speaking to me for the first time all day. Her voice wasn't as hostile as Marcus's, but it wasn't warm either. "Let's just get it over with." We gathered in a small conference room at the back of the funeral home. Marcus and Jennifer sat on one side of the table, Claire on the other. I took a seat by myself, feeling isolated and small. Arnold Patterson opened his briefcase and pulled out several documents. "Before we begin," he said, adjusting his glasses, "I want everyone to understand that Robert Wells was of completely sound mind when he made these arrangements. I have medical documentation to support that, as Robert anticipated there might be challenges to his wishes." Marcus leaned forward. "Just read it, please." Arnold cleared his throat and began. The will was detailed and specific. Robert left his share of the family business equally to Marcus and Claire. He left his investment portfolio divided 3 ways among his 2 children and me. The house, his primary residence, he left to me with a provision that I could live there as long as I wished. And upon my death or decision to sell, the proceeds would be divided between Marcus and Claire. But there was more. Arnold continued reading, and now I include a personal letter to be read aloud at this time. He pulled out a handwritten document, and I recognized Robert's careful script immediately. My eyes filled with tears. Arnold began to read. "To my children, Marcus and Claire, and to my beloved wife, Catherine. If you're hearing this, I've passed on, and I imagine there's tension in the room right now. Marcus, I know you're angry. Claire, I know you're confused. And Kate, I know you're hurting. Let me make something absolutely clear. Catherine did not manipulate me. She did not trick me. She did not marry me for money. In fact, when I proposed, she made me promise to keep my finances completely separate from hers. She never asked for anything, not once. Marcus, do you remember when you visited last Christmas? You stayed for 2 hours, you checked your phone constantly, you left early because Jennifer wanted to attend a party. Claire, you came to see me 4 times in the year before I met Catherine. 4 times. I'm not angry about this. You have your own lives, your own families. I understand. But I was lonely. After your mother died, I was so lonely I considered it might be better not to wake up some mornings. The house was silent. The days were empty. I had money and success and a legacy, but I had no one to share small moments with. Catherine changed that. She asked about my day. She learned to make your mother's pot roast because she knew it was my favorite. She sat with me during storms because I never told anyone I developed a fear of thunder after the tornado that hit when I was 8 years old. She knew that. She cared enough to notice. She made me laugh again. She made me want to wake up in the morning. The changes to my will are not about money, they're about recognition. Catherine was my partner in the final chapter of my life, and she deserves to be treated as such. Marcus, you will inherit the business you've helped build. That's appropriate. Claire, you will be well provided for. That's appropriate. And Catherine will have security in a home. That's also appropriate. But here's what I really want. I want you 3 to talk to each other. Really talk. I want you to see past your assumptions. Marcus, I want you to let go of your anger. Claire, I want you to let go of your skepticism. And Kate, I want you to forgive them for their doubts. Family isn't just blood. It's the people who show up. It's the people who care. You're all my family, and I love you all. Please don't let my death create a permanent divide. Please try to see each other the way I saw you. Good people struggling with grief and fear and love all tangled together. Marcus, remember the time you were 7 and broke the neighbor's window playing baseball? I didn't yell. I helped you apologize and earn money to replace it. I taught you about taking responsibility. Claire, remember when you were 10 and that girl at school bullied you? I didn't call the school or her parents. I taught you how to stop, nd tall, and use your words as power. I taught you about inner strength. I'm trying to teach you both one more lesson. Catherine isn't your enemy. She's a good woman who made my last years beautiful. Please don't punish her for that. And Kate, if they can't see that right away, be patient with them. They're grieving too. Their grief looks like anger, but underneath, it's just love for their father and fear of losing the last connections to him. Be kind to each other. That's all I ask. With all my love, Robert. The room was silent when Arnold finished reading. I was crying openly now, not bothering to hide it. Claire had tears streaming down her face. Even Marcus looked shaken, his jaw tight, his eyes bright. Arnold folded the letter carefully and placed it on the table. Robert gave me specific instructions, he said gently. He wanted me to leave you 3 alone for a while after reading this. Take whatever time you need. I'll be outside when you're ready to discuss the legal details. He gathered his briefcase and left, closing the door quietly behind him. The silence stretched out, heavy and thick. I stared at my hands, not knowing what to say. What could I possibly say? It was Claire who spoke first, her voice small and wavering. I didn't know he was afraid of thunder. I looked up, surprised. What? The thunder thing, she repeated, wiping her eyes. I'm his daughter and I never knew that. How did I not know that? He didn't like to show weakness, I said softly. He thought it was silly, being afraid at his age. But during storms, he would get quiet and tense. I just started sitting with him. We'd watch old movies with the volume up. It helped. Claire covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Marcus stood abruptly and walked to the window, his back to us. His shoulders were rigid, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. I should have visited more, he said finally, his voice rough. I always meant to. There was always something, work, kids' activities, Jennifer's family obligations. I kept thinking there would be more time. He knew you were busy, I said. He was proud of you, both of you. He talked about you constantly. But he was lonely, Claire said, her voice breaking. Our father was lonely and we didn't even notice. I got up and moved to sit beside her, hesitating for just a moment before putting my hand on hers. She didn't pull away. He wasn't lonely anymore, I said gently. The last 3 years, he was happy. He told me all the time how lucky he felt. He'd lived a full life, had children he loved, had success in his work, and then got a bonus round of unexpected joy at the end. That's how he described our marriage. A bonus round. Marcus turned from the window, and I was startled to see tears on his face. I was horrible to you, he said. At the funeral, before. I was so convinced you were using him. I understand, I said, meaning it. If someone had married my father at the end of his life, I might have thought the same thing. You were protecting him. That comes from love. He left you the house, Marcus said. But there was no accusation in his voice now, just statement of fact. I didn't know he was going to do that, I replied honestly. We never discussed his will. I assumed everything would go to you and Claire, and that was fine. I didn't need anything from him except his company. What was he like? Claire asked suddenly. In those last years. Tell me what Dad was like. So I did. I told them how Robert had taken up painting, creating terrible abstract art that he hung proudly in his office. I told them about his Tuesday morning routine of walking to the bakery for exactly 2 cinnamon rolls, 1 for each of us. I told them how he'd learned to use video calls, so he could chat with old friends who had moved away, and how proud he was when he figured it out without help. I told them about the time he tried to surprise me by cooking dinner and nearly set the kitchen on fire. About the afternoon he spent 3 hours assembling a bird feeder and got so frustrated he was cursing at the instructions, only to sit and watch the birds for hours once it was finally up. I told them about quiet mornings reading the newspaper together, about his terrible jokes that he'd repeat constantly, about how he'd hold my hand while watching television like he was afraid I might disappear. Claire laughed and cried as I shared these stories. Even Marcus smiled at a few of them, his defensive walls slowly crumbling. "He sounds happy," Claire said finally. "Really, genuinely happy." "He was," I confirmed. "And he never stopped loving you both. He told me stories about your childhoods all the time. Marcus, he was so proud when you landed that big contract last year. Claire, he bragged to everyone at the grocery store about your promotion." "He did?" Claire asked, surprised. "Constantly. The checkout lady knew your entire career history." That got a real laugh from both of them. We talked for over an hour. The anger and suspicion gradually melted into something gentler. Grief, yes, but shared grief. Understanding, slowly building between us. Finally, Marcus spoke, his voice quiet but firm. "I'm not going to contest the will." Jennifer, who had been silent this whole time, made a small sound of protest, but Marcus shook his head. "No." Dad was clear. He was of sound mind. He wanted Catherine taken care of, and she should be. This is what he wanted. Claire nodded. "I agree. And Catherine, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I was cold to you. I'm sorry I didn't try to get to know you. I was protecting a memory of my parents' marriage, but I wasn't seeing that Dad had found something new and good." "You don't have to apologize," I said, but Claire interrupted me. "Yes, I do. You made my father happy when I couldn't or wouldn't. You gave him companionship and joy. That's not something to resent. That's something to be grateful for." I couldn't hold back the tears anymore. I cried, and Claire hugged me, and Marcus came over and put his hand on my shoulder, and for the first time since Robert died, I felt like maybe everything might be okay. When Arnold Patterson came back, we told him there would be no contest. The will would stand as written. He looked relieved. "There's one more thing," Arnold said, pulling out a small box from his briefcase. "Robert left this with me 6 months ago. He said to give it to Catherine after the will was read, assuming you were all still speaking to each other." He handed me the box with a gentle smile. Inside was a key and a note in Robert's handwriting. The note said, "Kate, if you're reading this, then my children have listened to my letter and opened their hearts. I'm proud of them. This key is to the storage unit downtown, number 47. Inside you'll find something for each of you. Share it together. Love always, Robert." The three of us looked at each other, curiosity replacing grief for just a moment. "Should we go?" Claire asked. I nodded. "I think we should." The storage facility was only 10 minutes away. We drove there in Marcus's car. The four of us crammed together, the tension from earlier completely dissipated. Jennifer was quieter than the rest of us, but even she seemed less hostile. Storage Unit 47 was climate-controlled and surprisingly large. I unlocked it with shaking hands and rolled up the door. Inside were 3 large items, each covered with a tarp and labeled with a name: mine, Marcus's, and Claire's. We pulled the tarps off carefully. Under Marcus's tarp was a beautifully restored vintage motorcycle, gleaming chrome and deep blue paint. Attached to it was a note. "Marcus, this was the bike I had when I was your age. I restored it this past year, working in the garage while you thought I was just tinkering. I hope you'll ride it sometimes and think of me. Love, Dad." Marcus ran his hand over the motorcycle, his face a mixture of shock and joy. I didn't know he still had this. I thought he sold it decades ago. Under Claire's tarp was an antique writing desk, beautiful oak with intricate carvings. The note read, "Claire, this was your grandmother's desk, and her mother's before that. Your mom always said it should go to you someday. I've had it restored and I filled the drawers with letters, one for every birthday until you turned 70. Open them when you need to hear from your old dad. Love, Dad, Claire sobbed as she opened one of the small drawers, finding it filled with sealed envelopes, each labeled with a future date. Oh, Dad, she whispered. Under my tarp was an easel, professional painting supplies, and several canvases. The note said, Kate, you told me once that you wanted to paint but never had time or money for supplies. You gave me so much joy. Let me give you this small thing in return. Paint beautiful things, my dear. Paint memories. Paint hope. Love always, Robert. I couldn't speak. I just stood there, staring at this incredibly thoughtful gift, this evidence that Robert had listened to every small thing I'd ever mentioned, had cared enough to remember and act on it. The four of us stood in that storage unit, surrounded by Robert's final gifts to us, and we cried together. Not tears of anger or resentment or suspicion, tears of love, tears of loss, tears of gratitude for a man who had thought of us even in the end, who had worked to bring us together even from beyond death. He really loved us all, didn't H.E.? Claire said softly. He really did, I agreed. Marcus wiped his eyes roughly. I'm going to teach my son to ride on this bike, and I'm going to tell him all about his grandfather. I'm going to write back to Dad, Claire said, clutching one of the envelopes. I know he won't get the letters, but I'm going to write responses. It'll be like we're still talking. What will you paint first? Jennifer asked me, speaking directly to me for the first time with genuine curiosity rather than coldness. I thought about it. I think I'll paint Robert's garden. The one where we met, where everything began. Over the following months, things changed between us. Marcus invited me to family dinners. At first it was awkward, but gradually it became natural. I met his children, Robert's grandchildren, and told them stories about their grandfather that made them laugh. Claire and I met for coffee every Tuesday morning, carrying on Robert's tradition of going to the bakery. We'd get cinnamon rolls and talk about our weeks, about our memories of Robert, about our lives. I stayed in the house, Robert's house, our house, but didn't feel like I was keeping something from his children. It felt like I was caring for a space they were always welcome in. I turned Robert's office into a painting studio. Claire was right. I wrote letters back to Robert, even though he'd never read them. I told him about reconciling with his children, about learning to paint, about the life I was building that honored his memory. One evening, almost a year after Robert's death, Marcus and Claire came over for dinner. We did this sometimes now, the three of us, cooking together in the big kitchen, sharing a meal in the dining room where Robert had once sat. I need to tell you both something, Marcus said as we finished eating. Claire and I looked at him, curious. I talked to my therapist about all of this. He continued, about Dad's death, about how I treated Catherine, about the will, all of it. That's good, Claire said encouragingly. Therapy helps. She made me realize something, Marcus went on. I wasn't really angry at Catherine, I was angry at myself. For not being there more. For taking Dad for granted. It was easier to blame someone else than to face my own guilt. He looked at me directly. Catherine, I'm sorry. Really, truly sorry. Not just for how I acted at the funeral, but for all the time before that. You were good to my father, and I should have been grateful instead of suspicious. I forgive you, I said simply. I understand where it came from. You're family now, Claire added, reaching across to squeeze my hand. We're all family. And that's what we became. Not the family we were born into, not the family anyone expected, but the family Robert had hoped we'd grow into. His final lesson to us was about love, that it comes in many forms, that it can surprise us, that it's never too late to open our hearts to new people. I think about him every day. I see him in the garden he planted, in the paintings I create, in the warmth of his children who have become my friends. The money, the house, the inheritance, none of it mattered in the end. What mattered was the love. What mattered was the connection. What mattered was learning to see past our fears and assumptions to the truth underneath. Robert Wells taught me that when he was alive, and he taught his children that even after death, some people measure a life by wealth or achievement or status. I measure Robert's life by the love he left behind, and by the bridges he built between people who thought they were strangers. That's his real legacy, and every day I try to honor it by being a little more open, a little more understanding, a little more willing to see the good in people, even when it's hidden beneath layers of hurt and fear. Because in the end, that's what Robert taught us all. Love isn't always easy. Family isn't always simple. But with patience, honesty, and willingness to see beyond our assumptions, we can build something beautiful, even from loss, even from grief, even from the most unlikely beginnings. Robert's final gift wasn't money or property. It was the gift of bringing us together, of teaching us to truly see each other, of showing us that family is built not just on blood but on choice and care and commitment. I'll spend the rest of my life being grateful for that gift, and for the 3 beautiful years I got to spend with a man who taught me what it means to truly share your life with someone. Thank you, Robert, for everything. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. Your comments mean the world to me, and I'd love to hear your own stories about unexpected family, second chances, and the surprising places we find love. Have you ever been misjudged or learned to see someone differently? Share your experience in the comments below.